All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And I just heard my cell phone sitting here vibrating, and I'm going to oh yeah, make sure the volume is turned all the way down. Chris, welcome. So awesome to have you with us today.
Thank you.
And I got to tell you, it's very interesting. I know I was telling you this before I hit the record button. Is normally the way I find out, and get introduced to guests is through other entrepreneurs that I've known, maybe known them for years, or other entrepreneurs that I've interviewed that have had the experience and are like, Kev, you should also interview so and so for your podcast. Let me connect you to them. But in your situation, Chris, Taylor, in fact, I don't know. I mean, can we share her last name? I mean,
Cole, Taylor Cole.
Taylor Cole. Okay. She reached out to me because she somehow or another found out about my podcast.
Yep.
And she was like, Kevin, she sent me an email and she goes, Kevin, I want to tell you about a gentleman named Chris Vaughan. I think he would make a great guest for your $1 Million Relationships podcast. And here's some stuff you can take a look at. And if you feel the same way, let me know because I'd love to get you guys connected. And that was the first time that has ever happened to me where a PR person reached out like that. And what's really cool, and I know that I was telling you about this before, so it made an impression, and I checked you out, and I'm like, oh yeah, Chris looks like a really cool guy, and so you and I made time to talk, and we had a conversation, and I'm like, and we totally hit it off. I'm like, absolutely, man, let's do this podcast interview. So we set that up for today, and now, so here it is. Today we're right after the Labor Day weekend. We're the week after the Labor Day weekend right now. And so the Thursday last week, my family and we took off for an extended holiday weekend for like 5 days and stuff. Well, that Thursday, she had sent me a message saying, okay, here's a photo of Chris, and here's his bio, and here's some other information that you might find helpful. And Chris is really looking forward to doing the interview with you next week. And if you need anything else, be sure to let me know. Well, I was out of town, out of the office, didn't even see that email. And we came home on Monday, so I think I saw the email yesterday, which then she had sent me another email saying, hey, Kev, I sent this to you last week, but maybe you missed it. And so here it is again. And be sure to let me know if you need anything else. And Chris is really looking forward to doing the interview with you. And I thought, and I know as soon as we hopped on Zoom here today, I told you, Chris, I was like, Taylor is on top of it, man. and I mean, I'll tell you, anybody out there looking for, I don't even know I don't know what her bandwidth is or what, but if you're looking for somebody on your team doing PR, I mean, I don't even know Taylor personally or nothing, but I'm telling you what, Chris, she's on the ball, man.
I really appreciate that. I could not agree with you more. I'm sure she appreciates the shout out, and I could not recommend her highly enough.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you, so what we'll do here today is I'm going to start by turning it over to you. So what I always like to do, during these interviews is start by setting a little bit of context and giving our listeners a little bit of an idea, Chris, of who you are and what you're all about. And so why don't you share a little bit about, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you're doing in the world and the impact that you're making. And we'll start there.
That sounds great. So my wife and I started this firm together in 2001. So we launched our careers at a big consulting firm here in Chicago. We were partners there. We met and we fell in love and we got married and we quit to start this company in 2001. And we are focused exclusively on serving membership organizations and associations. And to start, let's just talk about what an association actually is, right? It's an organization of people who come together for a common purpose. They're not-for-profits. They're run by volunteers. And there is an association serving literally every inch of human life, right? Every possible pursuit that you could think of, there's an association behind that, supporting it, serving it, and making it happen. So some of them everyone's heard of, you know, about the American Medical Association and the American Bar Association and the American Dental Association. There are 40,000 associations in the United States serving the needs of people who need to come together. There are at least a dozen associations for podcasters alone. So check it out. There's a group out there for you. And the real reason they exist is to facilitate relationships at scale. That's what they do. They bring together people who have something in common, a common purpose that they want to serve, and they organize them in different ways. They bring them together for events. They help them share information and research. They help them create the standards that make things like the internet work, for example. They help them network. They help them train and educate and consult. And without associations doing that, modern life would not be possible.
Yeah. Wow.
There would be no internet. There would be no internet. The appliances in your home would burst into flames, right? You know, cars would not operate. Entire breeds of animals would die out. I mean, I could sort of go on and on. We believe in our hearts that associations make the world possible. And by making them better, we are making the world a better place.
Okay.
So our mission is to help associations grow membership and revenue so they can thrive and excel at serving their missions.
Okay. Okay. So me, knowing very little about associations, although, you know, it's interesting, we started the Thompson, and I don't know if I ever told you this when we spoke before or not.
Yeah.
But in 2008, we started the Thompson Family Foundation, which is just, it's our own family. And I have always just supported that organization financially out of the business proceeds every year and stuff. And we very seldom take donations and stuff. And what it's really done over the years, we launched that in 2008. So that Thompson Family Foundation is 16 years old at this point. And we have 7 children. And what I can tell you that us as a family, running that family foundation, it has brought our family so much closer together by just doing cool stuff together and for a common purpose through the family foundation and stuff. Yeah. And so, but what you're talking is on such a much bigger scale than what we have done with our family through our own family foundation stuff. And so how do you go about, I mean, I don't even know. I mean, and maybe this is a little bit self-serving because I'm like, wow, it would be really cool if I was able to accept money from other people. And there might even be people that might want to give us money, but I've just never even entertained it. I never even thought about it before.
Yeah.
But now talking with you, now I'm curious and stuff. So how do you go about helping these organizations raise money and that kind of stuff?
We help them go get members. So most of our clients some of them do fundraising, but most of them are trying to attract new members to join.
Okay.
And trying to keep members. They want their members to stay. And that's really the challenge, is how do we attract more people and how do we get them to stay? Okay. And it's a very unique marketing challenge because it's not purely transactional. Right? In the for-profit world, you're providing a good or service. I get value out of the good or service. We're done. And maybe I come back. Associations are selling relationships, long-term relationships that provide some sense of meaning and belonging and purpose to the members that ideally lasts for years. So that's a very unique challenge for people in the for-profit world to understand. And over the last 20 years, we've really mastered the strategy around how do you communicate that kind of intangible value to people like you or any of your listeners in whatever field they might be in, that, hey, your people are here. We have things to offer that you don't know about, but you need, right? We can create experiences and resources and tools for you that will change your business, that will perhaps change your life. Join us is really the message. And that's the kind of consulting and marketing that we do, is how do we help them hone that message? How do we help them deliver that message? And then ultimately deliver on that promise to the members that they're getting the experiences that we held up to them, and they're coming back year after year after year.
Yeah. Wow. That's really fascinating. So What is, and you don't have to name names or anything, but what is a result that you guys have helped one of your clients get that your guys are just really, really proud
Yeah, we say our definition of success is explosive growth for our clients. We're really looking for transformational change.
of? Okay.
And we do that a lot. We've helped one of our clients, they tripled their membership growth rate in a year.
Wow.
We have another client, they doubled their membership in 2 years.
Okay.
We have a client, we help them multiply their non-dues revenue by a factor of 10. Those are the kinds of results that we aim for with our clients, and as often as not, we get them.
So what is non-dues? So I'm assuming that dues is annual membership fee or dues or what have you. And so what
Exactly
is
right.
non-dues revenue then? What does that look like?
So associations, they do events, and a lot of them make a lot of money off of
Okay.
events. A lot of them do training and certification. They have publications. And very importantly, a lot of them offer third-party products to their members, things like insurance, like financial products, like discounts on product, third-party products and services. Travel, let's say, is a very popular one.
Okay.
And it's a source of revenue for the association, and it's a source of member value. But it's one of the ways associations create audiences, very valuable audiences for for-profit companies.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. You've really got me. I mean, especially a guy who facilitates relation. Now you've got me thinking about, but I could totally get sidetracked in this interview and I'm not going to. Maybe you and I can talk more later.
let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set, we'll
Yeah.
be on track here. And so I'm gonna reiterate the question around relationships for the benefit of our listeners. So, Chris, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm really excited to hear your story around the topic of relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you asked that question, because before you asked that question, I'd never thought about it. And now I
Okay.
can't stop. And now I can't stop thinking.
Really? Wow.
If I look back at sort of all the people, all the relationships I've had that have changed my trajectory in a really meaningful way, I could literally go on and on. I had a high school principal who was at his wit's end with me, who forced me to read philosophy as a punishment.
Wow.
But it turned out that I loved it. And it
Uh-huh.
opened up a pathway to me that led to a PhD, and ultimately affected the way that, I think about everything. There was a priest that I met when I was in high school who saw, in me, a kid who'd really lost his way, and took me under his wing and mentored me into a very special college, right? Where I
Wow.
found my people and I found my path, and moved forward from there. My very first boss took a green behind the ears consultant and gave him a shot at leadership, and launched what turned into a really meteoric consulting career. But the guy I really want to talk about is the guy that helped me launch my consulting career, not once, but twice.
Okay.
So my very first consulting job, right, out of philosophy school, when I had figured out that philosophy wasn't all that lucrative, got myself a job in an IT consulting firm because I knew a little bit about that. And I'd been in the field, let's say, a grand total of 3 years. I was 27 years old, and there was a really, I had some skills, and I'd risen pretty quick in the 3 years that I'd been there. And there was a really big opportunity with a client to do an IT strategy project, right? It's a big deal. And they did a bake off with me and a couple other, like, far more serious, experienced guys than that. And the client picked me for some reason that I'm still not quite sure that I understand. So here I was, morally convinced that I had no idea what I was doing whatsoever. And they brought in the national practice leader for this, who was, for all intents and purposes, to me at that time, God, right? He might as well have been God. His name was Bob Tipton, and he was very famous in our world. He built a really successful business. He'd sold it to my firm for, $1 zillion, and he was kind of the alpha male in our whole geek hierarchy.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So the opportunity to work with him was really mind blowing. And just so you can picture this guy, he's 6'5". He's a dead ringer for John Tesh, right? He has a voice that's like Moses, if Moses had a podcast. I mean, you know, he could have played the role of God. And I was really just hoping and praying he was going to do this project for me, right? You know, and let me ride shotgun with him. And he did the opposite.
Okay.
He
Okay.
made me do the project.
Uh-huh.
And he rode shotgun and he pushed me out in front of the CEO and the executive team, and he made me sell my ideas. And the one piece of advice he gave me, and I will never forget it, the one piece of advice he gave me was don't lie. And that may sound really obvious, right, at this day and age, but in a publicly traded consulting company in the 90s, that was a far from obvious strategy for success. Like, tell the truth, like what kind of growth strategy is that? And I took it to mean be yourself, right? That was his advice to me, was just, be yourself. Uh, and I did that. And they bought it, and it turned into a huge client, and it put me on the map in the firm. And because of that, I made partner faster than anyone else had ever in the history of the firm, because I had that experience for him. And it was a huge first lesson, that I did know what I was doing, and that imposter syndrome is an insidious lie. But beyond that, there's real power and integrity, right? Be who you are, say what you mean, do what you say, and the world will create a path for you. And I believe that ever since, and I've followed that ever since. A few years later, the dot-com bubble exploded and took the company with it.
Okay.
And we were all unemployed for a while. And I called up Bob, and he had started his own company again, but not in technology. And that really surprised me. Bob was really passionate about transformational change and why so few companies could do it and so many companies could not. And he drilled in on that and started a change management company called RS Tipton Incorporated that focused exclusively on helping companies achieve transformational change.
Wow.
And really dug in on that. And he basically had nothing, but he was being who he was, right? He was leaning into his integrity and the things that were really important to him. And that gave me the courage to do the same. That gave me the courage to start this business, Sequence Consulting, and follow my heart and the things that I thought were really important, which were the things that I've shared to you, which is helping these associations help other people change the world. It wasn't easy. I mean, he really struggled, and he made a lot of mistakes, and he had a lot of failures, but he was literally a man on the mission, and he did not quit. And I probably would have quit, Kevin, a dozen times if he had, right? If he would have given me permission to quit, I would have walked away and tried to go get a job again. But he kept going, and we did too. All these years, we tried to work on a couple of things together, right? We tried to do a couple of projects together. It didn't really work out. But looking back, I think he actually fired me once. In fact, I'm pretty sure he did.
Uh-huh.
Looking back at it, I don't know why, but I'm sure I deserved it. But that was 23 years ago, right? 23
Wow.
years ago. He helped me become a consultant, and then he helped me become my own kind of consultant and launch this firm. And he's very successful. RS Tipton is a B corporation. He helps mostly public sector organizations achieve transformational change, which affects the lives of millions and millions and millions of people who depend on public services, and those organizations being their very best. He's doing really well, and he's really happy. And we're really successful, right? We've been here for 23 years. We've served dozens and dozens of associations with millions of members all over the world. Over half of the top 20 associations are Sequence clients. We've worked with Fortune 500 companies. We work with companies all over the world. And I owe an awful lot of that to Bob
Yeah.
and his example that he gave me. So I'm really glad you asked me the question, because before that, I would have said I don't have any heroes,
Uh-huh.
but I do. I do.
Hey, and
And,
that,
and
I'll tell you, Chris, that comes through loud and clear.
yeah,
And how instrumental Bob has been in your life and your wife's life, and you know all the lives that you have been able to impact through the work that you've been doing for 23 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, it is mind blowing to think about that and the impact that it stemmed from Bob, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you look back over the last 23 years, I'm sure you could come up with a ton of examples of this. I'm just going to challenge you to come up with one. You know, what is an example where it was such a stark reality that you were like, you personally got to make this really huge impact where even you were like, wow, that was amazing. And looking back, that would have never happened if not for the relationship that you and Bob
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good example. That's a really good question, I should say. I think the example that I'm most proud of, that we are most proud of, is a client that we worked with, a very large medical society that was in a really bad place, right? I
had.
mean, they'd been declining for a long time. Their members literally hated them, right? If you
Wow.
did the research and asked that, they had a very, really terrible, brand perception. And they just sort of kind of clipped along and clipped along for 150 years, literally doing exactly the same thing, exactly the same way. They
Okay.
tried a lot of things. They'd spent a lot of money with consultants and they'd never made any difference. And then they hired us. And we were able to come in and make a huge difference with them, right? That was the client that we helped them triple their growth rate in a year, right? We helped
Wow.
them increase their young membership by 15% in a year, right? Unbelievable results, completely unheard of. And we were able to do that not just because we were in this space and that we had the expertise, but because we had the integrity to tell them the truth, right? About what their member experience really was and why they thought it was so bad, because it was, right? Why what they were offering wasn't really ringing the bell, right? The way they wasn't talking. And they resonated with that. They really rose to that. I mean, it was almost like that consulting gig I did with Bob 23 years ago, that, be yourself and the world will open up a path for you. And it opened up the path for that client. And they're still using what we taught them. They're at their largest size that they've been in I think 20 years.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Tremendously successful and continuing to grow. It was a real inflection point for them. And we're grateful that they give us a ton of credit for doing that, which feels really good for us. But what really feels good is seeing them succeed,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
watching them make that kind of transformation and knowing we were able to have that sort of influence.
Yeah.
And I credit with Bob with helping me become that kind of consultant who can have that kind of an impact.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really phenomenal. Huh. Well, so for anybody, I mean, I just really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation, Chris. And for anybody that's listening to this going, man, Kev, I really like Chris. I like what he stands for. I like how he shows up, man. How can they find out more information? Any resources, any websites that we can share with them when we release the podcast here?
Sequenceconsulting.com.
Okay. Okay.
You'll have case studies of some of the clients, some of the stories that I told you. We've got a lot of our thought leadership out there, how we think about this, some of the research that we've done, some ideas that we've perfected over the last 23 years. You'll see the clients that we work with and the breadth of experience that we have. And I think there's a lot of really useful information there, and I hope people can check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, any last thing that you would feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Here's one thing that I hope that people would take away, right? That a lot of what associations are good at is relevant in the for-profit world. Loyalty, belonging, the intangible value are things that matter to people, no matter who they're doing business with. That the things associations are really good at, for-profit companies are not. And I think there's a lot to be learned from looking across. Perhaps you don't think about not-for-profit. Perhaps you look down on not-for-profit, and that's a mistake. There's a lot of really good, really smart things going on there. And some of the Fortune 500 clients we've worked with have learned an awful lot. So, we would encourage people, one, look up your association and join it. Believe me, they need the help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And two, look at the association and world and see where are the opportunities for you to leverage those relationships or build relationships like that or build a following like that, that will also change millions and millions of lives.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I'll tell you, that's, man, that hits home so much because, I in my previous business, I used to own a publishing company.
Yeah.
And we grew that business through doing strategic partnerships with other entrepreneurs. Over a 12-year period, I did almost 400 strategic partnerships.
Wow.
And I was so grateful to those other entrepreneurs for helping me spread the word and stuff. And that company would not have grown to the level it did without their help. And I was just so appreciative. And you can just really tell when somebody cares versus somebody's just trying to pitch their thing.
That's so true.
And
so true.
And it just we all get that feeling, whether it's intuition, whatever we want to call it, and you get that feeling like, oh, I really like this person. I can't even put my finger on why, but man, I just like them. Or the same thing on like, man, something just doesn't seem right, but man, I don't want this going any further.
I get it. I do. Yeah. Yeah.
and like what you said about, I have learned so much from, well, I mean, I think like, even hosting this podcast and having, over the last 2.5 years, we just released 200 and I don't know the number, but we're well over 200 interviews done. And I am just so
amazing,
blessed and honored to be just having conversations on a regular basis with entrepreneurs who are doing such huge things in the world and being able to facilitate relationships. And heck, I'm already thinking of like some people I want to connect you with and stuff.
Great. Yeah.
And so, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today, Chris. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I love what you do, and I love being part of it. And again, thank you so much for making me think about something that important.
Absolutely.